Hello everyone, good evening. Thank you all, appreciate your patience. So, in the Western United States, particularly for us in this room, Hollywood, social media, tends to have a pretty significant impact on our lives. The concept of love, relationships, is one of the many things that Hollywood tries to portray in many different ways. But the question is, what effect does that have on us? Are we aware of how it's being portrayed, of how it affects our own actions, how it affects our own thoughts, as we ourselves, most of us in this room, are either searching for love and or trying to strengthen it. And that's really what we're here tonight to talk about. And so my name is Ashkan. On behalf of the Bahá'í Club here at ASU, I'd like to welcome you all. So for those of you who are not aware, the Bahá'í Club here at ASU, their goal is really to have meaningful conversations and deepenings that channel towards action, which leads to social transformation. They're on Instagram at ASU Bahá'í, so please follow them if you can. And tonight, some people who are going to be here, I'd like to introduce the two hosts for tonight who will be up here on stage. The first individual is Dr. Nura Mowzoon. She's actually an instructor here at ASU. She was an ASU graduate. She got her master's and PhD in Nova Southeastern in Florida in marriage and family therapy. So she is both a professor here of the social sciences, but she's also a relationship and marriage coach as well. The next individual is Penn Badgley, as we all know. Penn is best known for his roles in Gossip Girl and You. But what people may or may not know is Penn is also a writer, he's also a producer, he's also a musician and an artist, and he's also a husband and a father. So those I don't know why that's so funny, but before they come on stage, I want to go over a few logistical things tonight, okay? So when the conversation starts, in terms of photos, please no flash photography, it can be very distracting. We have a live stream here in the middle, and so those of us who choose to stand up and need to go to the bathroom, just please don't walk across the center of the stage. Next is, please follow us at ASU Bahá'í. And again, the hashtags today are hashtag ASU Bahá'í, that's ASUBAHAI, and the hashtags are also meaningful conversations. For those of you streaming and watching at home, overseas, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, your engagement, and those of you here as well, on the Instagram, ASU Bahá'í Instagram account, if you have comments regarding the discussion that's happening on stage, if you have questions as it pertains to Hollywood's portrayal of love and relationship, please post them on that particular forum so that we can then get them and give them to Penn and Dr. Mowzoon while the event is going on. Let's see, what else do I have written down here? We talked about the meet and greet already, and that will not be one individual, that will be 5 individuals, just to clarify that. And that's about it. So Penn and Nura and Dr. Nura Mowzoon are going to come in a second. So when they come in, let out all your photos, take your snaps, take whatever you want quickly so that they can come in and we can start this conversation. So thank you all again for coming, and please welcome Dr. Nura Mowzoon and Penn Badgley.
Where did Ashkan go? Ashkan, bring the mic up, because we're not sure about these. Hello! Well, we could hold them like this.
No.
Appreciate the info.
Hello. Well, these chairs will keep us at attention the entire time.
It's sort of like
Really
gonna drift very slowly. Hello, thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Nura, Dr. Nura Mowzoon, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Bahá'í Club for inviting me. The hosting.
I'm gonna assume you guys were all cheering for me, right? Welcome, you guys. It's so great to see you here. It's so beautiful to see how this has just come to life. Penn and I are really excited to be here. And as most of you, if not all of you, hopefully know, we're going to spend the night talking about relationships and love. We're going to talk about how Hollywood has influenced, or media has influenced our understandings, our preferences, our views, and then mix in a little bit of reality with it. So,
Shout out to reality. Wherever they may be.
So
It's right here. It's right here. It's good. We're in reality. Carry on. I'm sorry. This hopefully it'll be like this the whole night. We've really been developing a rapport. We just met in person 2 days ago.
3 days?
3 days ago. Yeah. We've been cracking each other up. Tripping out on reality.
Yeah, I've just been, I haven't laughed so hard in like a week. So, anyway.
It's not very long, to be honest. That's...
So, anyway, what was I saying?
We're talking about love!
Yeah. So a few months ago, the way that this whole thing kind of came about, a few months ago I don't actually remember what I was doing, but the idea kind of popped into my head because Penn and I actually have a mutual, very close friend. And for those of you guys who have had me in classes before, who know me personally, you know that talking about relationships and love and dealing with relationships is what I do for a living. It's my biggest passion. And every class that I teach, even if it's a class about like racism and prejudice, somehow I work in relationships. I'm not sure how it happens. It's kind of a gift. But so a few months ago, I had this idea to try to reach out to Penn and see if he'd be willing to come and do something like this. And it just all fell into place so easily, so perfectly, that here we are. And we're super excited, the Bahá'í Club's super excited to host him, I'm super excited to be up here with him, and everyone's just super excited. So as the night goes on, we're gonna just have a conversation about things, but we're also gonna, it's all of us having a dialogue and conversation.
Yeah, to be transparent about the inspiration here, so the Bahá'í Club is a group of people like many groups of people all over the world who are engaged in a process of community building that is based around the unifying teachings of Baha'u'llah, where people of all ages, all backgrounds, all faiths are encouraged, invited to learn alongside friends. One way we do this is to have meaningful conversations, really probing, understanding that certainly if it begins and ends in words, it'll amount to nothing, but it might have to start with words, start with thoughts. I mean, the small things that are affecting each and every soul here tonight are actually the things that that get in the way of large social progress, you know? We think about large things, but it's the very small, it's the very things, they seem small in comparison to social issues, but they're the things, these negative patterns of thought and beliefs about ourselves and each other, which are truly holding us back from engaging in a deeper, more profound level of friendship. I mean, you just said when you're talking about racism and prejudice, you work in relationships. I don't know how you wouldn't, because it is about a revolution, an evolution of relationships. So that begins in friendship. We're talking about a love. If we use the word love, it must be unconditional. one thing that I have meditated on very deeply in between takes when I'm putting various people in glass cages.
I'm so glad there were no woos about
Yeah.
that. Just nervous. No. That is bad.
See, what we just got was a microcosm of what's happening.
This is why tonight is happening.
Yeah. What do we mean when we say love? Now, even before we came here, Nura brought up something I thought was so profound. I was thinking, like, what are you thinking about? What are young people thinking about? I mean, I'm still pretty young. We're both young, but you're younger. You're truly in the period of youth. And it might be a question that we all know is sort of the most pressing one, and yet we're kind of embarrassed to put it so bluntly and simply, but we want to be loved. Right? Come on, try and tell me you don't want to be loved. Come on. So, as though we know anything about that, we're gonna, actually, this is not us telling you, this is not like a TED Talk telling you the 5 steps towards how to get love. It's profoundly different. It's actually partly an examination of the stories that we've been, we're breathing them, we're drinking them, we're eating and sleeping them, these stories that feature a very small...
Microcosm?
No. A very small, it's just, there's like a couple of protagonists we really know, there's just like a couple. And most of them, up until recently, they really, were sort of like the ones I play. It's like, a guy who more or less looks like me, might have a 4-letter name, like the Roberts and the Chris's, this kind of thing. Tanner. So, if we're really thinking of the level of social transformation needed to where all people are empowered to become protagonists, what about our stories that feature protagonists in written scripts? What are they telling us about who a protagonist can be?
Can you maybe elaborate on what you mean by protagonist? Like, I think most of us know what it means, but in the context that you're referring to, protagonist in what?
I think it's the marriage between the individual's personal transformation and how that is wed with that of society's. So, again, going back to those things which I mentioned earlier, those small things which are sort of holding us back from believing in ourselves. Trying to understand where those are coming from. Some of them are internal, but actually quite a number of them are external. Thing.
Okay.
Does that sound about accurate? She's also a therapist, and now she's acting like my therapist. She's like, So tell me more about that. And what do you think inside you is holding you back? Well, I don't know.
You brought it up.
What?
But I think that's a beautiful thing for us all to keep in mind as this night goes on, because this idea of how our own individual growth contributes to societal transformation. Because I think most of us can agree that the society that we live in is, it's not...
It's ailing.
Yeah, it's hurting.
That's a fair word.
Yeah, definitely. And so what's our role in that? Are we supposed to just stand by and watch it and be sad about it? Or Are we protagonists for change? Are we involved in actually making it better? And making it better requires growth, and growth is really uncomfortable. And so that's, I think, one of the things that we need to dig at a little bit tonight. So you guys didn't know we were going to get this deep, but now you're stuck here. So.
Maybe I could share just a little bit, and you enter in with your experience and data as you see fit. So when I was 20, I was on Gossip Girl, right? I'm just gonna plug. How about John Zuckerberg's dad? Is that really a thing? Like you guys? Yeah. I guess it's a. Yeah. Yeah, just shout out the movies. Lion King! Yeah, it's kind of aging out.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I was struggling. I'm not gonna. I'll try to reveal just the right amount of personal information. Right. I think it was very interesting because suddenly bequeathed upon me was sort of everything that we know shouldn't make us happy, but we actually secretly believe it will, which is like money and attention, desire from other people who you might find desirable. I mean, really, things that we think are our frustrations, our great frustrations. You check a few of those boxes. I was able to check a few of those off. Like, these things should not be troubling for me now, and yet it didn't seem to do anything in terms of my feelings of inadequacy. And so, in a way, like, thank God for Gossip Girl, because it really led me on what we could call like a spiritual pursuit. Really trying to plumb the depths of my interior to understand these things better, so it wouldn't sort of overtake me. Either in a totally egoic fashion, or just kind of like decimate me inside. I feel very small. And I think over the years I started to unpack the lessons I've been taught by the men around me, and not the men in my industry, but also the men I saw in the stories, and then thereby the men I was meant to play. I mean, there's something about the stories we're told about men, I think, that actually is maybe not getting enough of the right special kind of attention. Can we talk about men more, please? Can we just give men their time? No, but actually, seriously, what I mean is
They're so marginalized.
What I mean is that we're at a place where, as far as I understand, toxic masculinity is a term that has actually entered the DSM. Right? It's a diagnosable. Am I one-upping you right now?
No, I do that.
You're too busy teaching.
Yeah, no, I don't diagnose people, so I'm not up on the DSM.
Okay. Well, I'm not either. This is just one thing that I have found out. And part of this diagnosis is the inability, or maybe the incapacity, or the suppression of the expression of emotions.
Yeah.
the list. So, as much as we struggled with understanding how a male-dominant society is kind of running us into the ground, I think it's also men. I mean, I don't know what kind of awareness I have to say this, but I do think men are quite confused as to how they seem to have all this power and don't understand how it exists for them exactly, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's partly because the only mainstream media that's ever existed has come out of California. It's a very small segment of people that don't even represent the average man, the average Joe. And to some degree, it doesn't even represent their lives, it represents their fantasies. It represents their fantasies of how they believe they should have lived as a young man. And then they cast people who look good on camera and are about a foot shorter than you'd think. I'm not one bad. 5'10" is perfect average, just above average. Really, unless you're in the Midwest. And then you know, these men who actually often are quite sensitive and not anywhere near as confident as they portray themselves on camera. Then so there's this exponential line, this spiraling vortex of masking, of veiling. And while maybe none of this is such a novel or profound idea, I mean, what is profound is how we have not been allowed to see other kinds of people. I mean, it's just, we're so conditioned and now addicted, like you do with any drug. You know, your system comes to desire it because it's so used to it and it's used to those chemical triggers. We're used to just a small bit, one or a couple of white guys, like just looking good and rugged, pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, and really like transforming the world around them. You know, it's actually it's a great idea that an individual can rise up and transform the world around them. But you know, it is actually a fantasy.
You said something today when we were having brunch. You said the Avengers are just a bunch of, what is it?
Oh, no, you said hot. I said.
I did not say hot.
No, you said gorgeous. Actually, you didn't know this. You weren't referencing them actually, but the idea.
I feel like I didn't say that.
So it's I don't. That's not important. What it is like, you know, we have this idea of change that kind of climaxes with two gorgeous, ripped men punching each other.
Gorgeous men with beards.
Beards, I might have said. I mean, maybe it's because I have a beard now and I'm thinking about beards. I know one of them has a beard.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I mean, and again, like it has a lot less to do with the specificity of this movie with these two actors, but it's like, you know, literally ends with two superheroes, you know, just punching each other. I mean, it does, right? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. You're like, yeah, bro. That was like 5 years ago. If not, I saw it on a plane. I just thought, I remember seeing it and kind of like bemused, like, wow, this is, like, I'm sure a lot of people have the same thought, but again, you know, we have to recognize that this story may not stop itself, you know. And the franchise we're referencing is evolving too, you know what I mean? But again, like, are the structures that foster this story, are those changing, you know? And I think we can pretty much recognize that it's removing certain individuals, problematic individuals, does not change the system.
Well, and so then what happens is we're exposed to these characters in these movies throughout our entire lives from childhood. It starts with Disney, right? Like, think of every Disney movie before 2015, and the message that it taught was
We're literally dismantling my career right now.
But anyway, we're taught that a real man embodies a certain type of physical body, a certain type of stoicism, a certain type of harshness to him. And when we use phrases like be a man, that phrase, what does it imply? Be tough. And being tough implies holding in your feelings. Nobody ever says be a man and expects the guy to cry, right? And so we raise our boys thinking this is how they should be, and we raise our girls thinking this is who I should be with. And then we wonder why we're miserable. because we've boxed ourselves now. That a real man looks like this, and I should tailor myself to be attracted to that real man, supposedly real man, and that's also who I should date. And if anybody goes outside of that box, they're sweet. But we don't see them in quite the same light. I mean, is that a fair thing to say? And so what is this doing to our culture? What is it doing to our society? Setting us up with this certain type of expectation of behavior and attraction.
And again, I think it's like, I'm sure there are plenty here who very much explored this thought process. And I think rather than simply criticizing this phenomenon, it's recognizing that we're all fish in the water, we're all addicted to it. So we are having this chemical response, this sort of animal automatic response to it. So what is it that's going to actually allow us to overcome that? You know, this is the stuff of the human spirit, of will. You know, it's the immaterial. This is the spiritual part of things. So actually, this kind of gets right into this question. We don't know who it's from. If you want to like raise your hand after I.
Online.
Oh, it's online?
I think it's from.
Okay, shout out to the online viewers. So this says love at first sight, which is, I think you know a lot about the sort of chemical experience of this and some of the statistics on it, so maybe you can share this. In media, true love is usually portrayed as something that happens very quickly. How does that negatively affect our perception or expectations of love in our own lives? I'm wondering actually, I almost kind of want to, let's hear from you. I just really always want to go to the crowd real soon so it can become a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not easy with microphones. We'll try to answer the question ourselves and then maybe see what you think. There is. I feel like I've seen a talk that you've given about the numbers on this. That it lasts anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on the nature of the relationship. It lasts longer.
You watched that talk?
I did, yeah. If it happens in secrecy, if it's an affair, it can last longer. But if it's,
That wasn't my talk.
Well, no.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. But that's not to say it's a positive thing.
Right.
I mean, you're just bartering out your stash. You're like rationing it out, I should say.
Well, the idea of love at first sight is probably...
Can I ask real quick? Like, do you guys? I'm sorry. Let me manage this. No, I want to ask you guys. This is the only reason I'm doing this.
We're just talking about guys. And
okay, sorry. Go ahead. I just wanted to ask them.
No, go ahead.
Like, do you guys believe?
Yeah.
What is it like? Does anybody here believe in love at first sight?
No, you're all scared.
No, bro.
Yeah.
There's a couple.
You're all scared because you think it's a trap. Who believes in it? I mean, let's be honest. There's like one
Really?
here.
I've had it millions of times.
Here's the thing. I think sometimes we confuse love with lust or attraction.
Sometimes.
I'm trying to be gentle. Way to derail me, Penn.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. This is what's supposed to happen. But we confuse love with other things. I could talk about this for days. And
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I forget we're in front of the crowd. I was just going to make a joke.
It's okay. Do it.
Well, we only have right now.
He's so funny. So the thing about love at first sight is, honestly, if we were to ask you, well, what is it that you love about this person? So somebody just walks into the room and you're like, those cartoons where the hearts just come out of your eyes and you're like, they're the one. Like, what do you possibly love about them? Name one thing that you actually love about them. Hot.
No, it's quite cool.
I mean, you can appreciate that they're attractive, maybe you find them super attractive, but to say, again, this goes back to what you said in the beginning, the word love, it's so charged, and we don't necessarily quite understand the power of that word. But really, from a scientific perspective, it's impossible to just love somebody at first sight. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes it works out. Most of the time it doesn't, but we don't really hear those stories. We just hear the stories about how it worked out and, happily ever after, at least so far. And we don't allow room for the attraction or the relationship to build in any other natural way. So from a scientific perspective, there's no such thing as love at first sight. Attraction, sure. Lust, sure. But let's be clear that that's what we're talking about. If you find somebody attractive at first, fine. But let's be clear that that's what it is that you're feeling, rather than claiming that it's love.
Well, I'm also thinking about how that reflects in our media, because it's like, again, even as we understand that, we've really only seen models up until that point where, like, most stories of people coming together are up until they finally get past the kind of like wildly immature frustrations of first getting together, and then once they enter any kind of place of stability, credits roll.
Yeah.
Or you're actually witnessing the other end of it, when things ending. So we only know how things begin and end. We don't actually know anything of the stuff in between. Or rather, we learn in our lives, but we're frustrated as we repeat patterns. I mean, it happens for literally all of us. Like, the only reason we might know anything about it is because we have shared in this difficulty. So I guess, again, this is this sort of dual path as she considers the science. I'm thinking of its reflection in media, and so it's like we're actually kind of like being led down an unhealthy path just simply by the chemical composition in our bodies, and then we're being taught something that's unhelpful from, it's like the sort of contemporary secular version of the priesthood. It's like our storytellers. It's Hollywood, Let me go on to that thing right there because it connects to. Can I read it?
I feel like we might have already kind of talked about it.
Glorification of toxic relationships in the media. Don't do that. Why are characters
That's the whole
resistant?
reason you're here.
Yeah, right. I'm trying. I mean, I would like to say that. I mean, for all the potential incoherence of me portraying Joe Goldberg and sitting here trying to like explore these concepts of love and relationships, is actually, I think, as long as a show like this is so popular, it's really important. I think we all kind of have the responsibility to be exploring the themes very deeply. Why are characters who possess toxic traits on TV and film so often romanticized by the younger population? Do you think you can answer that just like succinctly? Like we're exploring a lot of things. Why?
Let me read it again.
Well, I think it's because, like you said, it always works out in the end. Even if they're toxic, somehow. I mean, look at 50 Shades. I mean, don't look at 50 Shades, but no. No, but that.
Gaze longingly at 50 Shades.
That entire, or even, what is it, Twilight. Like these, stop. But these movies where you've got profoundly tormented people, usually men, not because men are tormented, but because this is the storyline in Hollywood, is that you have the tormented man and the woman who saves him, right? And so it always works out in the end in these movies. I would challenge you to think of a movie where it actually didn't. That was popular, a popular movie that it didn't work out in. And so it gives us hope, and we're exposed to this message our entire lives, and we think this is just how it's going to be. And how many people in here, specifically women, because we're talking about media and its portrayal, how many women in here have dated men that you're like, I'll save him? I mean, you don't have to out yourselves, especially if you're sitting next to him. But I really believe that this is a trap that we fall into because of the movies and the way that they glorify this story. Even, again, Disney, filled with this story. But it always works out in the end in the movie, and it rarely works out in the end in a healthy way in real life. You can't save somebody who doesn't want to save himself or herself. So
This is connected to this question, relationship dynamics. Is the success of a relationship more dependent on the dynamic between a couple or the emotional IQ of the people individually? That's a little complicated.
What's the first part of it?
Okay, is the success of a relationship more dependent on the question might be flawed, but is the success of a relationship more dependent on I'm flawed too. Is the success of a relationship more dependent on the dynamic between the couple or the emotional IQ of people individually? There's something I was thinking of when you were just sharing this. Is that what we also do? We tend to even if we have a lot of emotional health, I'm not sure that we have a great model for anything other than deriving personal happiness from a relationship. Like, what is actually the purpose of a relationship? You know what I mean? That's a deep question. It's actually so broad that
and what's a healthy relationship?
Sure, yeah. And I think we're really accustomed to. I mean, the best logic we have is like, well, I'm in a relationship because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel worthy. It makes me feel, it at least, if you really think about it, I guess what we're working with is like, it temporarily relieves me from feeling as though I'm incomplete. I kind of think that's it.
Yeah.
And actually, that's not what another person is there to do for anybody. That's not what you were there to do for them. That's not what they were to do for you. So actually, if we are losing the capacity, if we're losing sight of the purpose of relationships, that means that at the individual level, two people are incapable of establishing true bonds of friendship or relationship. How could we possibly conceive of a state, of a nation, or a world doing what two people are incapable of doing? So, in a way, this is a real dissection and a real examination of how social transformation begins with the individual. It cannot rest in that, even if it's a great charismatic leader. What on earth are they going to do when a text from your mom really annoys you? And causes you to treat your partner with a little less kindness. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Shout out to moms, they're doing a lot.
My mom's here. I love you, Mom.
Oh, that's so touching. She's right there. Oh.
She's so great, guys.
So then there's this larger question: if we're not seeking personal happiness, well, if it is not another person who's going to give us the sense of completeness, what will?
You can answer that?
Tune in next time. So this is to me what is a matter of spirituality, I would say. You could call it cosmology, you could call it philosophical, and we could surmise that maybe it's most important to relegate these things to a person's individualistic beliefs, and that's fine. And there's a lot of rationale to that. I can appreciate that. However, this does actually get at the question of what we're doing here, And so this is something that we can think about tonight as well. Like, I would encourage, and in a positive manner, like I would encourage us to think that how we answer that question, like what is our purpose here? Because if we're questioning the purpose of a relationship, what is the purpose of a relationship? That does ask, what is the purpose of me individually? So this question is relevant to social transformation, is what I'm getting at. It also made me think of how interconnected these things are. This idea, what we always see, as long as we seek the other person, as long as we seek happiness through another person, however subtly or like kind of really unhealthily and overtly a person might do it, we inevitably find that person to be imperfect in some way, to be failing us, and then they become the enemy. Like, I'm okay, if you just wouldn't do that, then I would be this. If you just wouldn't do that, then I could have this. If you just wouldn't do, and we do that with our lovers, we do that with our friends, we do that with our family, and after childhood, it's just not true. Maybe when we're children, it is true, but then there comes a point where it's not anymore. So this is also connected to this idea that we're trying to socially shift from this concept of competition to cooperation. But we are really taught this idea that competition breeds success. Competition is the most successful generator of excellence. I mean, it's a profoundly capitalistic belief, And again, like our media systems have mostly been generated by and are operated by, capitalistic Western vested interests. Woo, this is going so far.
Okay.
Let's get back on luck.
I'm gonna rein it in real quick.
That was
and
fun
also
for a while.
just offer a little bit of a scientific angle on the question of success and is it dependent on dynamic or EQ, emotional quotient. So first, I think we need to decide or understand what success means. Does it mean just staying together at all costs? I don't know that would be success. But having a healthy, thriving relationship, that's success. That both people are feeling fulfilled in. And both people feel fulfilled individually as well. So a healthy relationship that is not codependent, you are secure and happy individually, and your happiness is not dependent on the other person, which is what you're saying. It's not dependent on the other person fulfilling that happiness for you. And we're not talking about like unhealthy relationships and like abuse. That's its own beast. So
no, we're talking about ones that actually would have a chance if we could
Right.
do the personal work.
Right. And then the other thing, dynamic versus EQ, it's about the dynamic. So you need to find compatibility on the happiest couples are compatible in very specific ways. We can talk about that later, I'm just kidding. So the ways that they're compatible, they have similar ways of handling conflict. So either maybe both of you are the type of people who like to talk it out immediately, or maybe you both need to take time, but if you have different ways of handling conflict, it makes it tougher. Compatible personalities, and agreeing on how power is distributed in the household, like who controls finances, do you both, does one of you who deals with what? And in fact, there's a lot. Communication is another piece too. So in a nutshell, because we have a lot to cover tonight, it's not about finding somebody who has super high emotional intelligence. Unless that's your thing, then that's what you need to do. But it's really about finding somebody who is compatible with who you are. And that's the other thing. We often have this ideal of this perfect person that we want to end up with, but then we have to ask ourselves, are we the person that person would be attracted to? We want this ideal, but have we worked on ourselves enough for that ideal to want to be with us? So again, it goes back to growth.
Growth.
Do you want to take some questions from the audience?
I would love to take some questions from the audience,
Yeah.
so this can really become a conversation. I'm looking at you.
I can hear you.
We'll repeat the question.
Yeah.
How has
So the question was, how has like watching your family members and how they interact in relationships and love, right? How they think of love, and how this has influenced. Sorry, I got you. Sorry, I did that to hopefully underscore how potentially emotional this can get for all of us. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, I have that habit. It's because it's actually a profoundly deep question. You know, it's like what we're learning from our parents. Basically, is what you asked. You know, like what lessons about love were we learning from our parents? And I mean, think about the ish they watched. You know, like the stuff they watched with us on holidays. You know,
On holidays.
I'm just thinking of like that stuff you remember watching, like I don't know, Die Hard is coming to mind.
Die Hard.
I've never even seen the whole thing. It's a okay.
But this goes back to what we were talking about earlier today about emotional and familiar.
About what? Say it.
So I will.
Sorry.
When we're exposed to our parents' dynamic, that what we view, what we see, what is modeled for us, is actually what becomes emotionally familiar to us. And so the patterns that we see with them, within one another, and also our parents towards ourselves, these dynamics, these interactions actually create connections in our brain that ultimately make us drawn to that often, especially if there's a degree of trauma associated with it. So I won't go too far into that, but basically what we see is what becomes familiar, for better or for worse. And what becomes familiar is what we end up being attracted to later on in life. So when we say, I don't know, there's just something about her, there's just something about him, usually you can, if you really dig deep, you'll see that it's connected to something in your family. That something about them is something that is familiar to you. It doesn't mean it's healthy and it doesn't mean that it's unhealthy, but it's something that feels like home. But home, you have to think about whether or not home is the best model for you. Sometimes it is, and sometimes there's stuff you need to work through. But what you see is what's familiar, and what's familiar is what informs our choices, in a nutshell. Do you want to say anything?
I mean, I just keep thinking about because again, it's like the way this relates to the stories we see in media is like, well, so then also what are we familiar with? And it's, I'm just encouraged to think that it's important to be conscious of what we're consuming, kind of like at all times. We don't have to dwell on that any longer.
Let's look over here.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I mean, are there any questions? Oh, okay, yeah, waving, flailing in the back. Okay.
I want to hear it. Maybe it's not.
Hello.
Yeah, got it.
Spoiler alert.
Hi everyone, my name is Jameson Roy, and I was just wondering, at the end of season 2, Joe, this is for you. What's up with that last girl that you saw peeking through the? You know what I'm talking about? I know what you're talking about. What's going on? I thought everything was good, but what's her name? Love. I thought it was true love.
This is why we weren't going to take questions from the audience.
It's fair. It's fine. Thank you, sir.
Jameson. Was it really worth all the flailing?
Well, I mean, so maybe at the essence of the question though is like, how could Joe really repeat that pattern, like that obvious pattern? Like we're watching, but like, no, what? The second he says hello, you're like, what? You have to be kidding me. But naturally, a person as disturbed as that is going to repeat patterns. So again, this is. Everybody thinks it's his mom, right? That's where. Yeah.
Oh, what?
That's what everybody thinks. This is a theory I've heard.
That's gross.
No, it's not. Well, actually, but he doesn't know that. Or maybe, oh God, does he? Joe! Joe!
You dropped to your knees. Why?
Rain's fault.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving on. Thank you.
You guys, if we could keep the if we could keep the questions to like, yeah, the topic at hand.
Okay. So how do you feel that like interracial relationships and like the portrayal of interracial couples and families in Hollywood? Oh, hi, I'm Christine. Okay. How do you feel that like the role of like interracial relationships, intercultural relationships, intercultural families portrayed in Hollywood has influenced the way that interracial couples, families are like behaving in real life?
Well, I don't know that I have any. I don't know that I have any. I mean, I have some thoughts, but like, I certainly don't have any kind of like expertise or authority on that.
It can be intercultural too.
Yeah, right. I mean, maybe you want to think. Yeah, you want to.
Go.
Yeah, same thing. Yes. You're asking what kind of effect the portrayal of interracial couples has had on the reality of interracial couples? Huh, you know, it's a good question. I would imagine it does. Here's one thing I've recently considered. I was in the theaters with my family, my wife and my stepson, and we were the previews of the previews were there, and there were actually a lot of interracial couples in the previews, and I started to notice, and actually just straight up like families of color, minority. I noticed one in particular was African American, and on one hand, on the surface, it seems like it's great. Diversity representation is obviously the way forward, like no question there. At the same time, sometimes when you simply just make people interracial, when you simply just make them a different color, but they're in the same aspirational large house with two nice cars, what that's doing is that it's erasing the reality that family would have had to undergo in order to be in that position. It has nothing to do with reality. I would even say like for the average, like middle class white family, the idea that you're giving your spouse a car for Christmas, that's crazy. That's a lot. You put a bow on it? Where does one even get the bow? That's gotta cost several $100s, at least. So, there's a certain, to me, like the problem that we're having of just painting things different colors is that we're not actually recognizing the history of oppression. I mean, that's my understanding. I'm seeing you nod, and you, on this, know better than I do, so thank you. I mean, that's my sense. So, like, what I see is that, like it is for, and I gotta say, as a person who's thought about this deeply, I've been working professionally since I was 12 years old. I was auditioning before that, so I've grown up in this water, and I remember often thinking the same thing when I might read a script, and it's just like you get the token family or the token friend, and it's like there's no mention of the fact that this person is living in a mostly white neighborhood and what that is. It's just it's kind of like everything's okay. It's like, well, that's sort of doing this. So to some degree, yeah, it's really complicated. I mean, it goes to show again. It's like I think the time has come where we can't be satisfied or expect such a small segment of society, such a small segment of people to reflect the world back to the world, like for us. We need to tell our own stories. So I would actually encourage anybody here who's thinking about doing that to please do so. And don't let the idea that Hollywood, is... Because by the way, anybody going to Hollywood and expecting to succeed, I include myself back in the day, is more or less delusional. I mean, the numbers are terrible. Like you're not, like you can't expect to make it. However, some do, and that's that. But, you know, actually, I think, obviously, what the internet does, but what the way media systems are changing is that there needs to be ultimately a decentralization, you know, it's like from the ground up. What does that end up looking like? I mean, God only knows, but yeah, I mean, I think everybody has to be telling their own stories. So please, those of you who are storytellers, you know, do that. I don't know. So don't let the convention keep you from believing in yourself.
We got another question back here, guys.
I don't even know where you are.
Hi, I'm Sabine, back here in the cheetah print.
Hey.
This question is for you, Penn, and I hope it's not too personal, but how did you decide that your wife was the one that you wanted to continue to make things work with?
There it is.
Whoa. What a question. Wow, that's deep.
I love that. Aww.
I know. Is that you? Yeah, I'll answer it. I'll wade into that one. I'll wade into the weeds on that one. Hold my hand, Nura. I do remember, upon laying eyes on her, that feeling. Even hearing her name before we met. The first thing I said to my friend who was about to introduce us, wasn't thinking anything of it in terms of introducing us. I said, wow, I feel like I could fall in love with that person. That might be a little crazy, to be honest. That's not, like, that's Joe level, maybe. I mean, like, what was going on
Yeah,
for me?
he was like,
I was like, I heard the name, done. And then I saw her, and I mean, she is outwardly as beautiful as she is inwardly. Probably not quite as outwardly, because we're all more beautiful inside. And I mean that. Because when we die, what else we got? Nura knows I joke about death a lot.
all the time.
All the time.
Like gruesome. Anyway, that's not the point. Back to your love
sorry.
story.
Anyway, back to when I first met my wife. I mean, upon laying eyes on her, I did have that sensation. But, you know, here, look, the truth is I had that sensation before, and it doesn't mean that it's not meaningful. And I didn't just, like, have it all the time, but two things happened. First, I did have this sensation of love at first sight, as much as it may exist. And
Which he had before, guys.
Yeah, I had had.
Let's remember.
No, I can say I had, like, you know, once or twice before, you know, like a really powerful feeling and conviction and wanting to pursue that relationship. Immediately after that, profound just chasm opening up, feelings of inadequacy. Presented with the opportunity for this kind of wholeness, suddenly fear, just absolute fear. I remember it. I remember as she walked towards me. Oh, I was like both feeling this sensation of affection and just like bottoming out fear. And it's interesting because, in a sense, in our story together, we could be really galvanized and buoyed by the sense that we had that first sensation. But let me tell you, since we met 6 years ago, we have encountered great difficulty along the way, no doubt. I mean, with anybody for 6 years, that's what happens. You know, if you're really having a real relationship, if you're having a profound relationship with each other, and then marriage. You know, I mean, the struggle is certainly part of it, and it's part of the blessing, because essentially my sense has been that what happens is then you are tested within an inch of your capacity. And actually, often that's when we think, well, this is too hard, they're not right for me. I'm experiencing too much frustration with the way they are. And I think this again gets back to this sense that eventually there is always going to be an imperfection about your partner that will drive you crazy. But it will really actually, like, it'll kind of drive you crazy. You know, like, that's not on them. It's not on them. They've always been that way. They were that way when you met them. and you didn't care about it then. So whose fault is it? You know, so to answer your question in a way that is both personally revelatory but also like relevant, is that I very much did have this feeling of love at first sight, but I also knew, okay, I'm understanding some emotional patterns here. I don't want to repeat this. You know, she also had a son. I didn't want to. There was immediate responsibility, always a real, profound sense of reality when children are involved. You know, you can't just be going about your irresponsible, like half-adult ways. I think I've said enough.
Can we
Yeah,
should kind of,
another one on this side.
I don't know where we're looking.
Let's go to this side. Yeah.
Okay, so I am I'm a survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, and I was just wondering, and I actually, as a way to grow, wrote a letter to you, Penn, about...
Wait, you're saying you wrote me a letter?
I did, yeah.
I have it, I forgot.
I have it, and I'm gonna give it to him. I was gonna do it after this event.
No worries.
Okay.
But, yeah, I just wanted to know, what have you guys learned about sexual assault, domestic violence from the survivors you know in your life?
Yeah, well, okay, well, I guess you technically asked me. Well, you're asking both of us, right? Nura, do you want to start that one? Because I've been talking a lot.
Remind me this. Okay, yeah. I'll start off by saying that where are you? Right, okay, there you go. I'll start off by saying that this is not my specialty, so I can't speak to that degree of expertise because it is very much its own thing. But a lot of it, again, is rooted in what is familiar to the person. You know, if you're raised in a household where a certain type of behavior, a certain type of dynamic is what's been modeled for you, or the way that you were treated, it's what you know. And this is why a lot of times the patterns repeat from partner to partner to partner. And it's heartbreaking, very difficult to get out of, but definitely possible. And I think what needs to happen is actually, well, a lot needs to happen, but on one hand, by having these conversations about what is masculine, what is healthy, having these conversations and intentionally raising our men to be kind, to be sensitive, to be compassionate, rather than hold it in, and then often your anger just explodes. So I'm not justifying the behavior at all, but a lot of it is rooted in children being treated a certain way and not being given the tools to actually act out in a proper, healthy way. So raising our sons and our daughters to actually understand what is healthy and to practice it. And then the other thing is removing the taboo that still exists to talk about it. So many women who experience this don't feel comfortable talking about it. They don't want to talk to their friends because they often feel that the blame will go on them. What did you do to provoke it? Are you sure it's not your fault? He didn't mean it. Or, what are you doing? Just leave him already. And so there isn't compassion for sometimes the process that it takes to get there. So I think on one hand it's about raising healthy boys and men and daughters and women, and also empowering women to feel like they can talk about it and that they have somewhere safe to go to when they leave.
Yeah, I mean, we all places need to be an asylum for people fleeing violence, gender-based violence. A statistic I learned from a woman who does this work and represents immigrant women and children fleeing gender-based violence. So it's also interestingly kind of like this, it relates to immigration and this country being an asylum for those fleeing. It takes an average of 7 times for a woman to leave an abusive relationship. So for us as their friends, how many times does it take us to get fed up and start blaming them? How many times have I been tweeted at like some trash about Beck? You know what I mean? Like how much we see her as at points a questionable character. How actually unlikable we find Candace. You know? I mean, this is it's troubling stuff, you know, like how willing we are to forgive the man in the relationship and how implicitly we feel the blame rests with the person who's receiving the abuse. So again, this is questioning our capacity for unconditional love, believing that it essentially exists, absolutely, no doubt. But like, how quickly are we letting ourselves get distracted from that? How quickly are we becoming impatient? You know, and the reality that like this culture of phones and just constant like TikTok's like a 6-second. How long does it last?
I don't know.
It's so quick. It's just so quick. I mean, it means the attention span of our children. We're talking about educating our children, right? Well, our children are watching TikTok, and their attention span is being just like shortened by the swipe. Where we want to go now?
We go back here.
Okay.
I don't see what's
Hi, sorry.
Where? What?
Here we go back here? Okay.
Oh.
Right here, the one with the broken leg. So my name's Jaden, and I actually do want to be a storyteller. I want to be a cinematographer. And I was wondering if you think that storytellers now have a greater job to morally influence people's ideas of love rather than entertain them and tell their own stories.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
We do have a responsibility. We absolutely do have a responsibility. That's partly why I'm here. Like, you know, again, as long as a show like mine is so popular, it's important we really expound upon these themes. And of course, more and more, the stories themselves need to do that. And I'm not suggesting that my show doesn't, but it's like it's a starting place. I think it's a starting place because of how viral it's become, you know. And thank God it's an opportunity to establish this conversation. It also points at the need for diversity of perspective, needing to have more and more storytellers of different colors, different backgrounds, different nationalities. I love the director of Parasite called the Oscars local. I love that. That was great. Anything you have to add about that, or do we want to? Let's keep getting through some questions. So
Yeah.
Why don't we go right here?
We have one right here.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll let them. All right.
Let's let the disembodied male voice tell us what to do.
But where is that disembodied voice?
Where is it coming from? Here?
Okay.
Hi, my name's Autumn. I just want to know, like, I'm from like 20 minutes from Los Angeles, so like, how did you make like healthy relationships in Los Angeles and like overcome like the bad ones?
I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't know that I succeeded in that. I moved to New York when I was 20. Part of the reason I was struggling is probably because I hadn't really established a lot of healthy relationships. I was trying, but you know, when you're 19, 20 years old, how many of you are like 19 or 20 years old in here? Wow. You know, I can say I never felt so old when I was that age, as when I was that age. I never felt so, not now, I don't feel old now, I feel so young. You guys are babies. You have great capacity, but you're so young, that's great. You're so much ahead of you. When I was that age, I mean, I just like, I have never felt as old as I did then, as heavy as I did then. I mean, the way that social matters were affecting me. I mean, I can't even imagine how you feel at this age now, seeing what you're seeing. I mean, in reality, it was still very much headed here when I was your age, but it's here now, you know, ever more. So, establishing healthy relationships in Los Angeles. That's like a Zen koan, is, you know, the impossibility of it makes you want to meditate. I'm not sure I can speak much to that.
can I offer a thought? Even though I didn't live in LA, but I think it's the same process that happens anywhere. True friendships happen when you have deep, meaningful, vulnerable conversations.
Vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're in a city, was I supposed to high five you? Okay. I don't know.
No, I was just.
So when you're in a city like LA, you know, it's a lot of people who are putting on a very specific type of presentation and mask. But I think they're still hungry for true connection. And so I think it just takes us taking the first step of being vulnerable and having a real conversation. And maybe they'll receive it and it'll be reciprocated, and maybe they won't. But then you filtered out the fakeness and you'll draw in what's real. I think that's true anywhere you go. I see your hands, but I feel like they're...
We're over here.
Okay.
The voice is over here.
Going back to your discussion about relationships and how they're modeled to you in your childhood and how that affects how you treat relationships going in the future, I found that it's very easy for me to develop a fear of love due to the complicated relationship that has been modeled to me throughout my childhood and still is modeled to me now. How do you advise that myself and others like me kickstart a path towards growth rather than just being scared of love?
Therapy.
Really? Yeah.
Really?
So okay, so let's actually have so can you go further? Can you unpack what therapy is? Because we get therapy from a therapist. We go as often as we can. If we can afford it, if we're covered, all that, and that's an entire issue as well. The capacity of a therapist is obviously something that, so can we kind of unpack what therapy is?
Well, so there's a ton of different types of therapy, a ton of different modalities and things like that. But what I can tell you guys is that statistically, I'll get to that in a second. Therapy, essentially, good therapy, helps you get to the root of the story of you. Not the story of you, but like the story of ourselves. Who are we? How did we get to be here? What are the narratives that we have in our lives that are serving us or not serving us? What have we experienced that affects the decisions that we make that may not be healthy for us, or that affects the fear that we have of connecting with someone because of difficult times that we've been through? So effective therapy unpacks that and basically helps you rewire whatever it is needs to be rewired, keep doing the stuff that's working for you, tweak the stuff that needs to be tweaked, and ultimately, you should be able to then feel empowered enough to be on your own. You shouldn't have to feel reliant on your therapist for like a decade. And if you want to know how to know who a good therapist is, the single most important factor in choosing your therapist is the connection that you have with him or her. That's the single predictor of whether or not it's going to be successful, is how much do you click with them. It doesn't matter if they have a PhD, it doesn't matter what type of therapy they've studied. What matters is whether or not you click. So you might have to try a few, but when you find one that you click with, you should stick with that.
And I would go back to this idea that it ultimately is leading to the individual becoming empowered to become a protagonist for change in their lives and their communities. There's a quote that to not to balance or exist in any kind of opposition or tension, but to go right alongside this therapeutic way is the key to self-mastery is self-forgetting. So there's I think to some degree, and please challenge me if it sounds like I'm saying something that's unhelpful, but I think also to some degree you cannot overturn every stone on the beach, and there comes a point where it is service to others, attention to the well-being, to the material and spiritual well-being of our communities, right where we are, that will help us in this path to recovery and that much more.
How about on this side? Over here?
Hi, I'm Lonnie. Earlier you mentioned that in order for a healthy relationship to work, they needed to have similar approaches on situations. So my question is, what's your take on how two opposites attract?
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but it's.
Well, you did.
I did.
Laughed in her face. I'm kidding.
No, but this is another trope that Hollywood teaches us, right? That opposites attract. What I can tell you is that statistically, opposites may attract, but they don't last. So there's an initial curiosity that happens a lot because this person may be so different from you that you're just naturally very curious and drawn to it. But like Penn said a little bit ago, often what you find to be annoying later on, you were okay with in the beginning. But we're talking about it on like a core level, not like, oh, you like rap and he likes country. Like that stuff doesn't matter. But it's about like, how do you view conflict? What are your goals in raising children? What are your goals for your life? The bigger, deeper things. Being opposite doesn't tend to work in your favor. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that was good.
Good.
Let me go. I'm just trying to point at this person here before. Why don't we try? Can we try this one?
Yeah, I don't.
She's real close, and we can repeat the question.
Thank you. This question's more for Dr. Nura. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll be on my phone.
Yeah. So I've noticed a common struggle as a first-generation kid, or a lot of immigrant kids in the United States. It's this, tie between like trying to find the person you want to be with, and then having different faiths. A lot of the organized faiths stem from very similar values, but a lot of people, when they're raised, they don't like to shift from anything, and you don't want to ask anyone you're in a relationship with to convert for you or things like that. But there's also pressure from family members and a lot of things that come along with it. So I guess the question is kind of, how do you combat those struggles in a healthy way to like maintain peace and stability with family members and relationships as well? I know it's heavy, but
it is heavy, and first generation, I'm one too. It's hard. It's hard, and I don't know that I have a perfectly prepackaged answer for you. I think maybe the best thing that you can do is start a conversation with your parent. Because are you basically talking about conflict with parents and how they view the potential partner, or differing worldviews between the two of you?
I think that when it comes for example, I'm kind of using my relationship.
Hypothetically.
So I'm Muslim and he's Christian.
Okay.
Which both religions stem from very similar values. But both families, are deeply more like traditional.
Okay.
So it's like kind of like the struggle from both families, like the pressure of like you should marry someone of your faith.
Well, Muslims believe in Jesus, so is it just with the probably Christian family? I'm kidding. Ooh, okay. Let's talk about religion, y'all.
What?
She didn't ask you. I mean.
You started.
Okay, sure.
You made it super awkward.
Keep going.
Yeah,
I didn't think it was awkward. I love it. Well, okay, so on like a kind of deep, simple kind of spiritual level,
Oh wait, but she did say the question was for me.
yeah, that's why I'm trying to. That's what I'm
Okay,
trying to.
I'll let you say what you're gonna say.
No, you go. You're just please.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm just going to talk about the unity of all the world's religions.
Yeah.
But,
I think you should.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, understanding that there is an essential eternal truth which all the world's religions are revealing to different people at different places, different times on earth. These different messengers often saying the same thing, understood in different ways by different people. So, you know, I'd say if the issue is truly between your beliefs, you know, you and your partner, that's something that's actually a really incredible lesson to learn. That shouldn't scare us. Because actually we all believe something differently, slightly, about the nature and purpose of life. You know? And if we let that get in the way, well actually, I mean, yeah, we're done. You know? We're just gonna, you know, slowly and then very quickly see our way out. So actually I think like finding the essential unity between beliefs is the way forward into the future. That is actually Baha'u'llah's message. So like we are Baha'is. And Baha'u'llah teaches that it's the essential eternal truth of these messengers, a bit like the way that the sun rises at different points on the horizon. It is still the same sun. You could also say it's a new day. You know, however, are you guys gonna call your parents, say that, and they're like, oh, cool, yeah, because, you know, otherwise wars wouldn't be fought, right? So, I mean, this is something that we think about a lot as Baha'is, like finding the essential unity between not just faiths, but belief systems, systems of thinking, patterns of thought and action, and finding the essential unity for all people, because we are one human family, right? But having not grown up in a Christian or Muslim family, I should step out and let Nura talk.
I think you're hitting on a really important point, that if you were to actually get to the core of whatever religion it is that you're talking about, the spiritual beliefs are basically the same. Spiritually, no matter what your label is, you believe in kindness, love, compassion, things like that. So it's the social stuff that could change. But in terms of how you navigate things with the family, I think what seems to be the most effective is when parents want to feel respected. They want to feel like their feelings and their thoughts matter, and rightfully so. So I think the key would be to address it again from a place of unity. You know, we can't talk about like unity without practicing it with the people that frustrate us the most. So approaching your parents with this dialogue from a position of wanting to seek out truth rather than wanting to prove wrong, I think works wonders. So it takes humility. It's hard. It's really hard. But I think that's your best route. Good luck.
We got one over here in the front.
Hi. It's a two-part question. I was going to ask, why do you think people aren't comprehending the true things and hidden meanings behind you? For example, being trapped in the box kind of resembles how it feels being trapped in a toxic relationship. So the second part is, how do you think people can learn to understand that versus going on Facebook and making news about it?
Can you okay, so if I understand it, it's like you're kind of asking, what is it your impression that most people are not kind of like getting the core message of the show?
Yeah, because I am minoring in psychology and majoring in family human development. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. Me too. So just that's mom. So
Nice.
I was just wondering why people, because I'm also a survivor of IPV, and I was just wondering why people aren't grasping that concept, because Joe is literally a murderer, but yet they're making jokes about him and the show, and they're not really grasping that he is a murderer, he's a bad guy, he's toxic.
Yeah, well, so there's a subtlety, so it's a profound question, and it's a deep and extremely valid question. There's also this kind of like, there's a qualification I would like to make, or like a disclaimer about the nature of the show. I'm not even trying to like explain it away. my understanding is like Joe is not a clinical portrayal of a psychopath. It functions more like the opportunity to have these conversations. It's social commentary. So like for all of the different phenomena we see in the show, the allegories or like Joe's behavior that we're really meant to analyze, I don't know that it's so consistent that it would like reflect the reality of a psychopath or a sociopath. You know, like I'm playing him. And sometimes what I have to do is just believe what he believes, which is that he's this incredibly sympathetic and kind person. So often he is actually kind of impossibly sweet. So the reason I'm saying this is because what your question I think is also asking is like, how is this the way that we're telling the story, or why is this the way we're telling the story? Because to me, it's a device that's been created specifically so that he is likable. Like we're making him likable. So in a way, your question is almost like too deep for Joe because Joe's not real. But I would also want to address your question. So to me, it's like, yeah, I mean, as a person who's on the show and like thinking about this a lot, I wouldn't want Joe to serve like a cautionary tale because I don't know that he's always a real. You know what I mean? I think more about the fact that he is a portal to have this conversation. But then let's actually get at your question. What was the second part?
It's how do you get people to understand the underlying meanings and things behind that? Because there are women who, for example, that get rejected and they're all of a sudden stabbed to death, and just trying to make that be more aware in that.
Yeah, that's you're right to ask it, and it's an intense question. It says something that the show is so successful and so intense, and it also, like on the surface, is somehow a lot of disturbing fun. You know, it's reflective of where we're at. Like that's where we're at. You know. Also, you said IPV. What is that? Interpersonal violence?
It's intimate partner violence.
Intimate partner violence.
Yeah, it's
sorry,
not because hers is domestic. It's just more like inclusive of everything, like emotional, domestic.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I just want to maybe say the unpopular thing. I personally wonder, I think we have Penn here who questions the character that he's playing and is uncomfortable about, you know, some of the reactions and the way that it's perceived and things like that. Generally in Hollywood, I'm not speaking to the show you specifically, but generally in Hollywood, I wonder if the intention really is to like tell this deep story and like really try to get us to analyze things. I just don't know that that's true.
Yeah, no, fair.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is like when it comes to these huge corporations which continue to merge and conglomerate, and there's like two left, you know, more or less. I mean, what is their vested interest? Is it for us to have profound self-reflection and become independent thinkers? I mean, no, obviously. So, you know, so we're up against a lot where we're going to see. It's a sort of stimulation. I think we should question, like, what is this stimulating? You know, what is it stimulating in us? Like, yes, we can elevate the conversation and have a lot to think about. Thank God, that's a human capacity. We can elevate. We can do with anything, you know. And then also, I think we have to wonder, like, you know, how much are we letting the kind of animal response, the sort of automatic response, take the wheel, and watch things that are stimulating this deep kind of sticky feeling as opposed to really trying out our higher nature, you know. And it's not strictly binary. It's not linear. It's like there's a lot of gray areas in this. So again, I mean, I think you're really right to be asking the question. I'm not even sure that we've answered it at all.
But thanks.
Yeah.
You guys, we have a question back here.
Hi, my name is Paloma, And my question kind of goes with the one that was just asked. Have you, Penn, or someone in the production review have considered adding resources or a hotline at the beginning or end of each episode for people who can identify with characters such as Leg, Ellie, or Paco, and that they've been able to recognize those patterns thanks to the show?
I think that's a responsible thing to do. I know the conversations have been had, and for all the things I've thought of in my moral quandaries with Joe Goldberg, I haven't thought about that one in some time. So thank you. It's got to be a responsible thing to do if it has any cultural relevance. So I wonder if I could promise you right now, third season, you'll see it. Thank you for that suggestion.
That was beautiful.
Saw somebody with you, yeah, kind of quicker.
My question is, so you mentioned that like people are searching for wholeness, and so do you think that it's possible for an individual to be completely whole? Because even when you talk to elderly people, they tend to tell you that each day they're learning and still growing. And also, as a second part to that, if you're already whole, what is the purpose of relationships in your life?
I think that's a great question. I would like to be extremely transparent about the body of knowledge I draw from, being the teachings of Baha'u'llah, among so many other knowledge bases, as we understand psychology better, and we understand, the composition of the human mind, and all of these things. But what you're talking about is a soul-level question, Is it possible to be whole? So, what does whole mean? And then assuming that you then are whole, what was the second part of that?
What's the point of finding someone?
What's the point of finding someone if you're whole, right? What is the point of a relationship, right? So I would say that if we're not seeking wholeness through people, it is through our relationship with that unknowable essence from which we come, I say that's a spiritual question. I would say that. I would also say that in that case, the purpose of a relationship, as we were talking about before, if two people can then function together, they've overcome the difficulty which was inevitable for them to encounter, because they actually are whole, or they're becoming whole. But then they're discovering how the purpose is not for them to sort of to complete each other. I mean, think about actually that word, you complete me. What? Okay, so then actually the relationship becomes the building block for society. It becomes the frontier for social change, for a just society.
And future generations.
And future generations. So actually, again, being hosted by the ASU Bahá'í Club, believing profoundly in the importance of this reality. If there is truth to Baha'u'llah's message, then actually it is a reality no matter what anyone says either way. There's no point in debating it. So if it is a reality, then we reveal it. We reveal it in our relationships. So I would actually suggest that we should try it out almost as a thesis. Let's try it out for some time, because we know what it's like the other way. Why don't we try this for a change? Thank you.
We got one last question.
One last one.
Close your eyes and just pick them out.
Oh.
Sorry, how you guys doing, by the way? Yeah, it's a bit heavy.
Hi guys, I'm back here.
Great.
So my name is Caitlin, and I have this question. Do you think it's setting our partner up to fail when we put so much pressure on them to be our everything in a relationship, and then get upset when they're not able to be our everything, to fulfill every single need that we may have.
Yes. Let's ask one more question. I mean, thank you. It's a great one because actually we're all wondering about it, but we would like to offer the unequivocal yes. I don't know how to do this well in a really equivocal
Okay,
way.
if you have questions about the show, put your hands down.
Yeah.
You're lying.
Why don't we go here? I'm pointing at you two arm wrestle for it. I don't know.
What are they wearing?
I can't tell. Yeah.
Scrunchy around the wrist?
Yes.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Hannah, and I have this question. So, as you've spoken about toxic masculinity and what we see in your TV show, how can we as women see the pattern of toxic masculinity in our spouse/boyfriend who doesn't even see it in themselves in the wrong and can't see the pattern themselves?
Yeah, it's a great one. Well, it's not your responsibility. And synonymous with that is this concept of an unconditional love. So, but what does love look like? Sometimes it looks like the discipline of a child. You know, sometimes love looks a lot of different ways. So if you love a person who is abusing you and thereby themselves, the thing to do is to be clear and leave.
Yeah, unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional pain.
Yeah, it doesn't mean lack of boundaries. So then I think furthermore, yeah, I mean, unconditional love also needs to equal justice. You know, it's upheld by truth and fostered in unity. You know, so I think like the onus is not on the individual, but maybe on the collective. You know, like because where the collective has gone wrong is been a place where that person could learn these bad lessons.
Okay, wait, I have a question.
Sure.
So, but what if you leave them, but you want to know, like, you want them to change for the better, but they're not.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can suggest it, but ultimately you can't change another person. Yeah. You know, you can't change. You can only change yourself. The best opportunity that person has to change is to see you empowered.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. I know a thing or two about this.
That's great.
I don't know how that happened. Marriage, no doubt, it is a learning ground.
I do want to add really quickly though, it's not about, like we should be sensitive to the people in our lives who are wanting to grow and change. The message is not, leave his ass. Like if he's trying to grow and change, and because he's a product of our environment. And women, you guys, we've got room to grow too. It's not just about the men.
There's emotional abuse as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I do want to clarify that when I said leave, I think it's much more like if when we're talking about legitimate abuse.
Yeah.
I mean.
But if you see traits that could be worked on, I would give him the benefit of the doubt. Not talking abuse. But if you see traits of unhealthy behavior popping up, try to address it. Try to have an honest conversation. Try to see if there's anything in you that is drawn to things that you're hoping to change, and maybe work on those as well. Again, I'm not talking. This is not victim blaming, and I'm not talking about abusive relationships. But if you're with a man who you feel is portraying unhealthy behaviors and toxic behaviors, at least give him a chance to try and engage in a dialogue about it. And then if it's a pattern that repeats, then yeah, like Penn said, ain't nobody got time.
Yeah, it's about boundaries. It's about boundaries. Boundaries, they need to be established.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to keep going, but
I know.
We have to stop.
How do we have to stop right now? Can we go like a little bit longer?
Maybe just a couple more. No, everybody's in the
Yeah, but I mean, we started a little late, so we'll just go a little late. Or like we're all getting late.
Is that okay? 10 minutes?
10 more?
10 more questions or 10 more?
Are you saying, I don't know.
How about this gentleman in the front?
Alright, so my name is Sergio, I'm Mexican, so. Alright, so my question is, do you guys believe that single mothers can raise young boys to be successful men? And how crucial is it to have a father figure in your life?
So, I mean, I absolutely believe it's possible. They do. However, they shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
This complex of like the woman as a superhero is unfair. Just to believe that fathers are not crucial in our lives is to continue the pattern that breeds toxic masculinity. It's to, I mean, on one hand, it is to relegate men to an irrelevant place. You know, we could say men are trash, but like it's half the population, guys. We gotta think more critically. Like I get you, I feel you. Like fathers need to step the F up. Where have they been? Right? But it is a crucial role, and it's one that we don't yet seem to understand at all. And so rather than abandoning it, we need to embody it. We need to manifest it. We need to believe that parenthood is important, which means that we need to believe in children. I mean, we need to believe in relationships. I feel you, man. I mean, it's like, you know, I was raised by a single mother, and they shouldn't have to do it alone, though, you know? It's like they should, like, can they? Yes. Yes. They do. You know, they do. And God bless them. They shouldn't have to do that. They shouldn't have to be a superhero. And then it gives also men the opportunity to be fathers. Thank you. Is that? Sorry, I get impassioned. It's like thank you.
You call us.
So guys, we have about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys gotta choose who you want. Because there's like, no.
Why don't
You don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah, I know. It's sort of, but thanks for being, yeah.
Hi, my name's Hannah, and I study family and human development and sociology, so this
Nice.
is like very much in my wheelhouse.
Awesome.
You said that the point of view is to open a dialogue about these kinds of behaviors, but do you think that that's really what it's doing? Because
The show, my show.
The show, yes.
Okay,
Because
let's
there
wade into this
are
one,
clearly lessons to be learned from it, and we're having the dialogue here, but you said before people on social media are glorifying Joe's behavior and they're demonizing like Beck and Candace and those people. So ultimately, like the broader audience of the show, do you think that they're getting this message and that it's opening a dialogue for them? Or is it just opening a dialogue for people like us who are already interested?
I don't know that I said the purpose of the show is to establish a dialogue. I think it's what certainly I'm using it for. Thanks. I believe it's my responsibility, you know. I don't know that. I mean, I think a lot of content that's even very consciously trying to do something like this, when we depict negative behavior, how much have we been able to depict any kind of really negative behavior without glorifying it? Like, how much do we love watching drug addicts? Like, we love it. You know, from young Leo to Breaking Bad, we love it. We love watching criminals. You know, we love this stuff. So, I even question my own language. Love, what is that? It's not, you know, do we believe in love as an incredible, unconditional, like unifying, cohesive force throughout the universe and our minds and hearts and souls? Well, then we don't love these things. We're being attracted to them. It's our lower nature. It's our animal nature. So, you know, is this show what you're asking the question I was asking myself before I took it, is like, is this show contributing to positive social forces, constructive social forces, or deconstructive social forces? I could surmise. I know that I have seen through the power of meaningful conversation the ability to transform my experience and my thinking. I know that I also take very seriously the level of conduct on set. Like, this is no joke, you know? Like, so those of us on set are hopefully having a pretty purified experience, I think. I kind of ironically, as intense and dark as the show is. So I kind of want to help to bring that to this larger thing. It's like, you know, as much as we might tell ourselves that a war movie is a great anti-war movie, we're seeing a lot of war movies, though. We're not getting any less war. And we put men, I mean, I don't know that men in the military can actually have that really nice tight in the side, but kind of long in the front and slick back at all times, and the dirt on their face, and it just looks so damn good. Like, is that what war looks like? So, you know, it's not, it's like, you're right to ask the question again. And like, this is being streamed live, so I will pause.
Okay.
I've been as forthcoming as I think I understand how, you know what I mean? But thank you for that. Can we get a little more?
This gentleman in the front.
Yeah, it's good to go. Let's get some a male voice or two.
Hi, my name is Fausto, and my question for both of you is, how has both of your careers changed the way you see relationships?
Do I go?
Sure, I don't know. I mean, you want, I could.
Yeah, you go.
Me? Okay.
Sure.
Career. Well, I mean, I see how, like, you know, obsession with career can really disintegrate a relationship. I mean, I see how, like, our values, our kind of maniacal pursuit of success can tear at the fabric of a relationship. A relationship should support what we want to do, not take away from what we want to do. Can you say a little bit more about the question? Can you just, you know what I mean? Like, it's.
Has it made you like think more critical when it comes to like treating people?
Has it made me give more attention to the way I treat people? Well, in my particular career, which is a particular one, I encounter a lot of people. I'm some kind of public figure, and then I also have to engage in like physical intimacy with other people, you know, who are not my partner, which I have to say I really don't enjoy. It's an unfortunate dimension to the job, which I think my personal feeling is like a lot of artists are kind of disingenuous about this, you know, like that it's for the art, it's a performance. Well, you know, your body is still like it's an interesting thing. So this is actually something my wife and I consulted a lot about before I took this role in particular. Understanding to some degree that it makes me like this, can I say sex object? You know, kind of it is to a great degree. And we thought about this long and hard, and I was actually willing for that reason. So, you know, and it was ultimately this consultation with my partner that led to me making the decision, you know? So in a sense, it's like, I do take it very seriously, like, I don't know, hopefully in the specific there's something universal, right? Like, I don't know if that was relatable, not all of you are like actors on television. In fact, I would venture to say probably none of you have been on two cultural phenomena, right? Like none of, like, and that's great, by the way. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Sometimes I feel like I am walking and backflipping through fire hoops, you know. Sometimes a little bit. I don't know if that answers any kind of deeper question for yourself.
For me personally, just very, very briefly, I think working as a therapist, and also even as an instructor here at the university, I've seen that people are actually mostly inherently good and hurt. That a lot of the negative things that we see are fueled by hurt in that person. And so I feel like it's given me a bit more compassion in any kind of relationship that we're talking about, whether it's romantic or platonic or family or whatever. So just in a nutshell, yeah.
Guys, this is going to be the last question.
Said that before.
I don't know. Where do we want to go?
You pick. I've been picking.
I'm seeing a lot of people point at you. Yeah, you. Yes. No, yeah.
Hoops.
Hoops.
Right?
Yes.
Hoops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi guys, thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to talk to you. My name is Loza. I'm studying theater. I love acting. And something we hear a lot with actors that take roles that are kind of vile or wicked is that they wanted to empathize with the character and find empathy and see the good in them. But Penn, you've been pretty outspoken in the opposite direction. So I'm wondering how you as an actor have balanced having empathy for your characters and balancing that without making it go too far. And Dr. Nura, in real life, how do we make sure empathy doesn't go too far?
Mm.
You want to start? I need a second.
Okay. You want me to try? See.
You have your own question from
Yeah.
the hoops.
Yeah.
Are you ready? But I don't think you have empathy for Joe.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't have empathy for Joe. I have empathy for people. I have empathy for people. I play Joe. When they say between action and cut, I judge him as little as possible. Frankly, to me, what your question gets at is questioning convention. So many methods used by so many actors, like so many things, like so many systems of belief adopted by so many people. I mean, where are they coming from? Is it coming from like mostly Freudian psychology, let's say? You know, is it coming from systems of belief which make the mind mechanical and the human animal? Techniques from these various systems of acting teachers. Who are those old white men? You know, like I don't know. I'm not sure that it's that necessary to convince yourself all these things to like perform. And you know, maybe there's a limit to my capacity as an actor. I'm not gonna be, you know, okay, fine, like figuring that out. I think it's far more important to be honest about this than it is to like be a good actor, you know. Of course, also there's a fine line to like the integrity of your conduct as an actor in your profession. So yeah, I don't know. But to me, the essence of your question gets at like questioning the belief systems that are kind of like impressed upon us by, which is really important. Like I don't.
I think she was asking though, I think, like, do you have any empathy for him at all? And I mean, from the conversations we've had,
No, I mean, he's not real.
I hate him.
Well, I don't even hate it. He's not real. You know what I mean? Like, he's not real. None of it. I mean, I don't know. I'm like so glad that we can have these deep conversations around him, but he's not real. I mean, again, I don't know that he's a clinical portrayal of a. He's not. Yeah, he's not a clinical portrayal of like a psychopath or a sociopath. So to me, it's like, what's the beyond the moments between action and cut and me just being present and giving life to this guy. I mean, I don't need to have empathy for a fictional character. Why? Like, I'm even honestly like maybe it sounds stupid, but I'm even wondering why that's important. Like, why is that important?
I think,
yeah, like because actors do talk a lot about having empathy for their characters and like. I don't know. I mean.
I think it might be about identifying with that character in some way. Like a lot of actors are like, I identify with them.
Surely. Okay. So yeah, surely I can find identity there. Yeah, definitely. Like give voice to the deep fears which then turn into rage. You know. I mean, apparently I do that somewhat easily. I got to work on that. Okay. Yeah. So yes, that's a great clarification. Thank you. I mean, I certainly identify with all. I mean, also like a credit to the show, a credit to the character, a credit to the writers. Like there are things he's touching on that clearly are universal. You know, clearly. Otherwise, it wouldn't be doing what it's doing. So to me, it's less about It's less about this overall empathy and being like, yeah, but Joe, you know what, at the end of the day, somehow I gotta love you. No, it's more like, what's happening now? What's he doing? Do I understand that? Yes.
And what can you just really quickly say oh, there you go. Can you just really quickly say the other piece of your question?
In real life and relationships and love, how do you make sure empathy doesn't go too far?
I think when it starts to chip away at your nobility, it's gone too far. I was just trying to be succinct, but yeah. And again, you can love someone and move on and still wish them well.
Yeah, empathy might mean understanding that there are harm to others and themselves, and that like boundaries are necessary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Penn. Thank you, Dr. Mowzoon.
Thank you all.
Also, so before everyone leaves, I thought we might actually take a moment to actually honor and acknowledge a number of women in the room who have been very vulnerable and open with their comments and questions today. So before y'all leave,
can you come up because this is streaming too, right? Isn't that the thing? This is weird.
Okay. The Bahá'í Club here at ASU is planning on having more activities like these. And so please follow us at ASU Bahá'í and look for also an email and evites sent out with regards to upcoming events about meaningful discussions surrounding various topics such as this. Additionally, for those of you who, your first time, what the hell is the Bahá'í Club? What is this Bahá'í faith? What is this? There's, on your way out, there's a booth with a number of members of the Bahá'í Club there. Please feel free to stop by, ask questions, get more information about what we're actually doing on campus and around campus. And then...
To be involved in it.
Sorry.
You don't have to be a Bahá'í to be involved in the Bahá'í Club. It's just like-minded people who want to work towards social change. That's it.
And there's also a photo booth on your way out, so feel free to take photos and do the hashtags. And last but not least, I have the names of the 5 individuals who will be part of the meet and greet. I apologize.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I apologize if I am not pronouncing these correctly, but Taya McCormick. Is she here?
She left.
Maybe she's not here. Okay,
Did
get
she
back up.
leave? Wait, is that?
That's
is
Jen.
that?
That's yeah. All right. So we have back up. So Caroline Lynch, are you in the room? All right. Julia Shamko, and then Isabella Renee, Caitlin Slattery, and then it sounds like for backup we have Tejas Singh. And so if you guys on your way out, just meet at the registration desk.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you once again.